ho, ho, ho! It's the 2024 British Broadcasting Century Podcast Christmas Special. 5 Gold Airings. Well, 5-ish, because Christmas is a time for giving. Yes, on this exciting festive special episode, we bring you vintage British broadcasting Christmases from the first couple of decades of radio, from 1922's first religious broadcast on the BBC to Carols from the Desert in 1942 via Cornish churches, Irish bells and that famous royal message. I'm Paul Corenza, your host, and I'm a big fan of Christmas history. I'm a big fan of British broadcasting history, so this episode is where the two collide like a reverse cracker, if that's a thing. Welcome to the 2024 Christmas special of the British Broadcasting Century. Listen out for those jingle bells.
This is London Calling.
Hello, ho, ho, it's Paul Corenza here. Welcome to the British Broadcasting Century podcast. Apologies for the delay since previous episodes. As you may know, it's one of our annus horribilis. That can't be a Latin plural, can it? But we're still navigating that, and I thank you for your patience when podcasts are maybe not quite as freely coming as they should or would or could or indeed have been. But trust me, the flicker of fascination is still burning bright within me, and I can't wait to bring you some classic British broadcasting tales. So we'll pick up the tale of August 1923 in the new year. 2025 promises to be quite a busy one in my broadcasting history project, including, well, things we can't talk about yet, but you will be the first to hear it. Well, actually, no, our Patreon patrons will be the first to hear it. Do join them on patreon.com/Paul Corenza and get in the club there. £5 a month, cancel anytime. And our most recent Patreon video actually unpacks one of the tales we'll tell you this episode. That's the Cornish Christmas classic Bethlehem, broadcast live from St Hilary Church in West Cornwall from 1926 to 1934. You'll hear a little smattering of it this episode. But what I really wanted to do this time was bring you 5 classic vintage BBC Christmases. Normally on this podcast I tell you longer stories and contexts and characters and try and bring it to life that way. But for Christmas I thought we need to immerse ourselves in the nostalgia of festive past. And so that's why this episode may be a bit less of me and a bit more of the clips. I want to let them breathe and live with you. So as we hear them, don't just see them as clips, but close your eyes and just imagine you are that first British broadcasting audience as we hear clip number 1 from the very first BBC Christmas. On Christmas Eve 1922, Rev John Mayo, the rector of Whitechapel, gave the BBC's first religious broadcast for Christmas.
This is 2LO calling. Rev John Mayo, the rector of Whitechapel, is going to give you a short address.
Now, the clip you hear here was actually recorded 10 years later, 1932. The programme The End of Savoy Hill, produced by Lance Seaverking, who brilliantly invited back in some of the lost voices from the previous 10 years once the BBC started to work out how to record things. So Reverend John Mayo here recreates what that very first BBC religious broadcast would have been like.
I have just come from my church in Whitechapel, a great church situated in the midst of all the noise and the turmoil and the dust and the slums and all that Whitechapel connotes. And it is my privilege, by the aid of the wizardry of Mr. Marconi in this wonderful house, to speak, as I understand, to many thousands of people. Surely no man has ever proclaimed the gospel from such an extraordinary pulpit as I am now occupying.
This is a perfect point to tell you. This is not an official BBC podcast in any way at all. We're talking about early broadcasting, and we're not talking with, here and under, or herewith today's BBC. And the clips we use are generally so old they're public domain. But regardless, we thank and salute the BBC past and present, and any copyright involved is going to be theirs, not ours. You hear? Good.
Having preached sometimes in cathedrals and sometimes in the kitchen of a doss house, I notice one great difference here. Whether in the cathedral or the doss house, I could at any rate see my audience. Here I cannot.
We've already done episodes of this podcast on the pre-BBC religious broadcast from Peckham, but actually the BBC did have Rev John Mayo give a religious broadcast just before this one for children. This was the adults one, but actually the kids got the religious broadcast first. Bit of radio Sunday school for them. You can hear more about Rev John Mayo and that first religious broadcast on episode 60 of this podcast, A History of Religious Broadcasting, 100 Years of God on the Beeb. And then if you go to episode 72, the first radio dramatist, you can hear all about The Truth About Father Christmas. That was the first radio play that came on the BBC directly after John Mayo's religious broadcast. So this episode is called 5 Gold Airings, vintage BBC Christmases brought back to life. Now, I say 5, it's actually 9. I mean, the list grew. I could have called it 9 Gold Airings, but the pun doesn't quite work in the same way. So can we just call it 5 Gold Airings and I'll give you 4 free? Actually, they're all free. This is a free podcast. 1926, Percy Pitt, the BBC music director, conducted the BBC Wireless Symphony Orchestra with Coleridge-Taylor's Christmas Overture. That same Christmas of 1926 is one of my favourite early BBC tales. From St Hilary's church in far west Cornwall came the first drama to be broadcast from outside of a BBC studio. There's a BBC producer called Philson Young who was down there on holiday. Actually, I think at that point he wasn't a BBC producer. A critical friend of the BBC, he might have been called. He was radio critic in the Radio Times as well. And while down there, he stumbled upon this church of St Hilary, beautiful church, overlooking the sea and St Michael's Mount, and he asked if he could play the organ there. He did. He struck up a friendship with the priest, Father Bernard Walk, and in ensuing meetings, he discovered this church had an annual nativity pageant. Not so much a performance, but an act of worship, but scripted by the priest, Father Walk. Filson saw the script in 1925 and asked if the minister would give permission for the BBC to broadcast this. He was dead against it. But actually, when he realised this could be a chance to amplify the cause of his new children's home he was opening, Father Walk finally relented.
This is London Calling. Now we're taking you over to St Hilary, Cornwall for the Nativity play. Mr. Filson Young is in the church and will introduce the players.
Tonight in this remote corner of England, storm-swept by the Atlantic gales, the St Hilary players once more give their version of that message. And on their behalf, I wish all listeners, as I am sure you would like me to wish them, a happy Christmas.
Delightfully, we have some of the recording of that Bethlehem play.
A permanent sound record is being made, and some future generation of listeners may hear what you will hear tonight, long after every voice that sounds in this church has been silenced in death.
We actually have some of the voices years later reminiscing about what it was like decades earlier. So first of all, let's hear from one of the young actors as an older man, speaking years later to BBC Radio Cornwall, Robert Carnell.
At that time, outside broadcasts were largely experimental with the BBC, but this one was a great success. They had to lay a landline from here to Trevelyan Farm, which is about, half a mile, or it's probably more from the church. And it had to go down a lane, across the field, across the yard and into the house, and was connected up to a telephone. And from there, it was phoned through, if you like, to Marzion, and then it was sent direct to London, and from there, of course, all over the country.
Here's Kitty Ellis.
We had to do this play, and oh my dear, and we children would be thrilled because there was never no such thing known out there. And we living in the country never went anywhere very much. We came to Penzance, it was like going to London for us, you know. We had no wireless or nothing. See, because we lived in the country, we never had anything like that. Those that did have it, of course, were thrilled.
So let's hear some of the performance itself then, shall we? So although this recording is from 1934, the original broadcast was from Christmas 1926, and this, from St Hilary in Cornwall, is Bethlehem.
And now listen to the bells, which for 500 years have called the people of St Hilary to praise and prayer.
They say that the Emperor at Rome has ordered everyone to be in his own city tonight. There were some people. I'm glad that we do not live in a town.
We saw an old man and a maiden, begging the innkeeper to take them in. They were tired and worn, but he said that they had no room for them in the inn, that the stable was good enough for the likes of they.
3 times the old man knocked and pleaded for somewhere for the maiden to sleep, until, for pity's sake, the master of the inn opened to them the oxen stall. I watched them enter and peeped into the stall, and what do you think I saw? The ox and the ass went down on their knees before them.
So these actors had to actually learn their lines, even though it was radio, no holding the script for them.
I was only about 8 or 9.
Muriel Peters.
They had to put me on a stool so that I could talk into the microphone. And the red light, and not to speak until the green light. No talking, not even coughing.
The first 8 broadcasts then went unrecorded. Gladly, they recorded the final one of 1934. The play did change a little each year, but every year those same cast members returned, and someone who once played a shepherd's boy would grow up and become a shepherd or a wise man or a Christmas lobster. No, that's a Love Actually thing. That's not in the actual nativity, is it?
Well, I was one of the people with the shepherds.
Gordon Floyd.
You know, shepherd boy.
Shall we be going up to Bethlehem tonight, Uncle?
Why, no, my son. It is all of the tribe of David that is numbered there tonight.
I wish we were of the house of David, for there'll be some grandeur and dancing there tonight.
The grandeur of Bethlehem is a grandeur that is yet to come. For God hath said, out of Bethlehem I will call my son.
I wish it were always springtime.
It will be always springtime, boy, when Messiah do come. The desert shall blossom like the rose. In the habitation of dragons, there shall be grass with reeds and rushes.
Reeds and rushes? Why, down at Relubus Moor, there be any amount of they.
You'll notice then Cornish dialect, even Cornish place names. These are essentially farmers who are playing shepherds, and it's written by the priest so that it's a pageant around the church, but it's referencing local areas and the dialect of Cornwall, telling the nativity story. The point being that the Christmas story is for everybody, wherever you are.
It was in the Cornish dialect, and I don't think it was so broad that English people couldn't understand it. Anyway, they must have done, because we had lots. He used to have sackfuls of letters from all over the country.
I've seen Bernard Shaw as close as I am to you. Yes, I remember him coming there of a Sunday morning. I think he came to see the play. I think possibly he came to see Father Walk because I suppose he felt that they had something in common.
The writer and priest Bernard Walk had a rather sad end to his time at St Hilary. He was essentially chased out of town. He was an Anglo-Catholic, and via his wife he was linked to the Cornish arts and crafts scene, and had some rather wonderful modern art brought into the church, but it could be seen as iconography, a little bit too Catholic for the Anglican Church. He had to even impose a secret knock to let the locals in, but ne'er-do-wells learnt that secret knock, tricked their way into the church, completely ransacked it, and Bernard Walk left soon after. What an unfortunate end to someone who was trying to bring art, religion, creativity and science all together so that we could hear it throughout the land from 1926 to 1934.
May God Almighty bless you, Father, Son and Holy Ghost. Amen.
We'll do more about Bethlehem on a future podcast, but suffice to say, it was hugely popular. I love the tale, especially as a proud Cornishman myself. I love the history of Christmas and the history of radio, and this is where all of those merge together. 1932, of course, has the first royal Christmas message from George V.
Through one of the marvels of modern science, I am enabled this Christmas Day to speak to all my people throughout the empire.
Broadcast live from a small room under the stairs, I don't think that's a toilet, in Sandringham in Norfolk.
I take it as a good omen that wireless should have reached its present perfection at a time when the empire has been linked in closer union. For it offers us immense possibilities to make that union closer still.
If you read my book, Hark, the Biography of Christmas, available now in paperback and audiobook, then you can read more of this tale of George V's first royal Christmas broadcast, how nervous he was, how they laid a small mat on the table that they told him was for effect, but was actually to stop his drumming fingers, and indeed how that first message was written for him by Rudyard Kipling.
It may be that our future will lay upon us more than one stern test. Our past will have taught us how to meet it unshaken.
2 years later, let's go to Armagh Cathedral and hear the bells.
The bells of Armagh Cathedral.
This was a very popular broadcast for 1934's Christmas. The idea of hearing the bells from around the land and indeed around the world once we had the Empire service was all very festive. And indeed now you've connected the world up. There was that idea of passing on Christmas greetings from different points throughout the Empire, throughout the world.
Our Christmas Day programme, 1934.
Agus sleintjan an árnach America is tasana agus an láid lia. Iad goléir le chéile an nullig vanni seo.
Here we are, a group of Ireland Islanders gathered together to celebrate our Christmas. We were talking Irish when you came in on us, for that is the language of everyday life here. Yet it is a language as old as the hills, and the antiquities of Ireland run back to the prehistoric ages, as you might see by the ruins of Donegal. It was in Irish our people first heard the story of Bethlehem, and all our Christian traditions are preserved in it. Now, there's more singing the Blessed Virgin's lullaby for the divine infant. Just listen a moment. Times have been very busy for Moore and all of us, so we're looking forward to a good rest. You know, we keep holiday in Ireland from Christmas to the 6th of January. The week before Christmas, everything is thoroughly cleaned and brightened up. Then on Christmas Eve, the door is left open till midnight to welcome those who were refused a place in Bethlehem. On Christmas Day, everyone meets early for Mass at church. There, they exchange greetings and inquire for the absent ones. Then home through the Boreans, where loose stone walls shelter them from the wild west winds. Our home is in a sheltered hollow, and the big turf fire makes the house cosy and bright. We talk of Breed and McDara who are in America, and Porrick who's away in Cork, and hope they're going on well. We have a kindly thought for the Aran men and women who have made their homes over all the 7 seas. And to all our listeners we send a hearty Christmas greeting. Agus leis an súalchas seo chiachnu a deangan na tíre, go bheith muid sonas the shén an olach our locht éisteachta, go mór a gine gael.
Local Christmas customs tried to prevail. 1936, let's go back to Cornwall, shall we, for a Cornish Christmas carol from the BBC chorus.
In dark December when winter was bleak, Christ Jesus was born of a virgin weak. He came for to save his world from sin, from death and nation and kind.
That was a Cornish Christmas carol, reminds me of home, and reminds me of 1936, if I wasn't born in the late 70s. Let's have another one from that year, from the BBC chorus, the Wassail song.
The Wassail,
So that was 1936, and we've gone well past our 5 gold airings, but I just can't help but give you 1 or 2 more before we go. So let's go to wartime. It's World War II, it's 1941, and children have been scattered as refugees. What does the BBC do? It helps link them up, even those across the Atlantic.
British children in South Africa, Canada, and the United States exchange Christmas greetings with their parents in Britain. And a Merry Christmas, everyone.
From the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation in Toronto.
And from all of us here in the BBC studios.
Christmas greetings from NBC here in Radio City, New York. Here are the voices of British children exchanging greetings with their parents. Children and parents are thousands of miles apart, but through radio, they will be reunited for a few moments of warm words of Christmas cheer. Now, first in New York, Roy Rich in London, we have 10-year-old Edgar Gordon.
Well, thank you, George. And here in the studio in London with me are Mr. and Mrs. Gordon, waiting to talk to Edgar. Mr. Gordon. Hello, Edgar.
Hello, Father.
How are you, boy?
I'm very happy. Merry Christmas to you.
Same to you, Edgar, and to all the folks over there. Everybody all right? Edgar, just a moment. Don't shout so much, Mr. Gordon. Everybody all right?
Okay. Yes. Aunt Emmy and Nina and Fred and everybody over here sends you your love.
And we are sending them ours. Mr. Gordon, what about Mrs. Gordon? Edgar, here's your mummy.
Hello, Edgar. Hello, Mother.
I'm awfully thrilled to hear your voice.
I have new tracks for my train.
Oh, have you? That's lovely.
A marvellous use of technology connecting people who are far apart in wartime.
Mr. and Mrs. Coe, are you ready in Belfast? Yes. Hello, Belfast.
Hello. Hello, Mommy.
Hello, darling. Christmas greetings to you.
Oh, Merry Christmas.
Isn't it just marvellous to be able to really say it to you?
Oh, isn't it wonderful?
Back here in London again with me in the studio is Mrs. Haskell.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas!
Isn't it lovely to hear you?
So that was 1941. And finally, before we wish you a Merry Christmas, should we close with a carol from 1942 in the desert?
This little group here, they have been having their sing-song, and it looks as though they're just going to start up. Yes, they're just starting up again.
Godfrey Talbot was the BBC correspondent with the 8th Army. At this point, they're in Tripolitania, which is in North Africa. He would follow the troops around for a very long time, embedded with them. His recordings on acetate disc were then sent back to Cairo. They had to be looked at by several different censors, including the Army and the Navy and the RAF, and the Egyptian government as well. And if it passed all of those tests, then via Egyptian state broadcasting, it would be radiated back to the BBC in London. So playing us out with Carols in the Desert for Christmas 1942, Godfrey Talbot and the 8th Army in Tripolitania.
Anyhow, there it is, just a carol from the desert. We're standing here in the moonlight on the sand. It's a very bright moon, a crisp, cold night. It's been hot during the day, but now it's quite cold, and very soon we shall all be creeping under the blankets and going to bed, hoping for a nice, quiet, dry night. In a few days it'll be Christmas. These men of the 8th Army will be doing the job they're doing now, chasing after Rommel. No time for parties. There may be a few extra things coming from Nappy, but for the most part, it will be a Christmas of, well, bully beef, biscuits, and sand. But they'll be thinking of home, and I hope that you, all of you at home, will be thinking of men.
So that's our 5 gold airings plus 4 free because it's Christmas. And thank you for being with us here once again for another year on the British Broadcasting Century podcast. 2025 promises to be nice and busy, and we're going to try and pick up the pace a little bit as well as those early BBC landmarks become fewer and further between. Next time then, August 1923, and we'll look at Irish and Scottish broadcasting landmark moments, including our guests Eddie Bowen and Graham Stewart. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please do share it, please do rate or review it. Consider joining us on patreon.com/Paul Carenza, and you can support the podcast even more. Do catch me on tour for an evening of very old radio coming to places near you, especially if you're in Gloucestershire or Shropshire over the next few months. See paulcarenza.com/oldradio for more details on that. And whether you're a first-time listener to the podcast, or if you've been here from the beginning, or most likely somewhere in the middle, may I wish you and your loved ones a very Merry Christmas. As Tiny John Reith observed,
Programmes will neither be very interesting nor very good.
God bless us, everyone. The British Broadcasting Century is presented and produced by me, Paul Carenza. Original music is by Will Farmer, and unoriginal recordings, in other words the old ones from the BBC, are so old they should all be beyond copyright. All our aim here is to inform, educate and entertain, and if there is any copyright involved, I'm sure it belongs to the British Broadcasting Corporation, all rights reserved. Thanks for listening and Merry Christmas from the British Broadcasting Century. Ho, ho.